Rockstar Games is a notoriously private company. Since the release of GTA 5, looks internally have become increasingly hard to come by, with those that make it past their front doors painting a picture of something akin to a video game Fort Knox, with required escorts, metal vault doors, and rare looks at the seemingly reclusive founding Hauser brothers. So when it comes to investigating the 10 or so canceled single-player DLCs for GTA 5, any official word is hard to come by. Data mining, leaks, interviews with former employees, and lawsuits are the name of the game. But with that comes investigating Rockstar itself, filling in the gaps of how they make games, and also how they've changed in the decade between 5 and 6. The lost DLCs hold a lot of secrets. The origins of online's most iconic pieces, the untold aftermath of Rockstar's most famous canceled game, and maybe one answer to 5's most iconic mystery. This is the lost DLC of GTA 5.
Alright, everybody pays attention, no one gets hurt!
Grand Theft Auto 5 released over 5 years after its predecessor. While between the two, Rockstar had released games almost yearly, the gap between 4 and 5 was the largest the series had seen so far, with the franchise continuing through 4's 2 story DLCs. What these episodes from Liberty City did was provide new perspectives to 4's base game, showing characters who cross paths with Nico in the main story, with vastly different tones in a way that felt like both what 5 would attempt later with its 3 protagonists, and what the PS2 trilogy had done before with its varying aesthetics. When GTA 5 would finally release, however, Rockstar's work was far from over. While they felt their game was uncompromised by the aging current-gen hardware, new consoles were only a few months out. When starting in on versions for the PS4 and Xbox One, the team would be unexpectedly blindsided by the new architecture, while also struggling to find ways to justify reselling a next-gen version of a game that had broken records only a few months prior. There were also new challenges in the earliest versions of GTA Online, with the team struggling to adapt the, as Dan Hauser put it, precision of a GTA single-player experience to the massively multiplayer world of online. Players suffered through connectivity issues and even broken tutorials as Rockstar continued to delay its promised heist modes. While work was ongoing, an update on Rockstar Newswire would not only tease online heists coming in 2014, but also, quote, continuing Michael, Franklin, and Trevor's adventures in southern San Andreas, hinting at future single-player DLC. Rumors and speculation would begin almost immediately. One member of the GTA forums would claim that data mining would reveal evidence of a North Yankton DLC, taking place in an expanded version of 5's prologue setting. Another group would begin to speculate that the UFOs and aliens seen in the base game were a hint to what was to come. The former would prove to be a hoax, fully made up by a modern forum member who was tired of seeing the same 3 conversations dominating the site. The alien DLC, on the other hand, however, did hold some water. While DLCs we'll talk about later will have much more information, the one focused on an alien invasion, while corroborated by later reporting, doesn't seem like it was very far along. It would be mentioned in internal documents acquired by multiple leakers within the community, and be confirmed when 5's source code would be released several years later. However, little else is known. Other single-player DLC assets would end up in all sorts of places. However, the only thing that we've seen for sure from the Alien DLC was this single piece of artwork as a garage floor. It's not much, to be fair, but some also point to mentions of Lord Zaphos on both Ron's radio show and the Cult Stoppers website as a potential alien overlord that would act as the antagonist. In addition, around the time these DLCs would have been worked on and even subsequently cancelled coincides with the release of the PS4 and Xbox One enhanced editions, which included the railgun as a bonus weapon. It doesn't really seem to fit in with the main game, and is before a lot of online's more absurd offerings. Even if its design is based loosely on real-life electromagnetic firearms, I don't think it's completely implausible that there could be a connection here. For me personally, this feels like an early out-of-the-gate idea as a sort of response to Undead Nightmare, that was likely in pre-production, but not much further than that. These what-if DLCs were not only a low-stakes tropey way for Rockstar to get something cool out of their system, but it seems that their previous attempt had outperformed the episode's DLC, the latter of which not seeming to meet Rockstar's sales expectations. Despite Michael's air quotes run-in with aliens in the main story, It seems that this one was going to focus on Franklin, due in part to it being known that the other two starred Michael and Trevor, and his run-in with Omega.
We are an infinitely intelligent race of supercosmic beings, and out of the 6 billion people on this planet, we have chosen you for no good reason.
You done lost your motherfucking mind?
Following the release of those enhanced versions, Rockstar's team was divided into 2 sections. One group was focused on furthering post-launch content for 5, and the other on the now ramping up development of Red Dead Redemption 2. At their motion capture facility on Long Island, not only would the cast for the Red Dead Redemption sequel begin production, but the original GTA 5 protagonist would return for the shooting of the DLC in early 2014. Not long after, community modders Chrome Mods, Tez, and Alexander Blade would post both on YouTube and the GTA forums data-mined information uncovering a DLC select screen for one project named Trevor and another named Dead. When selecting the latter, it was revealed that the game would check for something called SP_zombies internally, pointing to Los Santos being overrun by the undead. The zombie DLC, sometimes referred to in the code and in forums as Project Norman, was another what-if-style DLC in the vein of Undead Nightmare. With the intention of reworking large portions of the map to reflect a post-apocalypse zombie infection aesthetic, this project was primarily focused on Michael and his family at the center of the horde. That same data miner Tez would state on Twitter in 2019 that these were intended to take place in each respective ending, which would place this one in the timeline after Trevor's death, a sort of non-canon offshoot universe that could be changed like this without any lasting effects on the air quotes main timeline where each protagonist lived. This really feels like a step above what had been done before with the episode's DLCs. While they all did excellent jobs at juggling different tones, Liberty City is still Liberty City, if anything speaking to the diversity of stories that could exist within 4's world. It also helps to save work. While there was new stuff in the episodes, they weren't reinventing the wheel. From the way it sounds, however, Project Norman was. With derelict buildings, quarantine zones, and large dividing walls, Los Santos would be transformed, creating far more work for the team. That being said though, Project Norman was much further along in development than the Alien DLC ever was. In December of 2023, when 5's source code would leak, 18 missions would be discovered, focused on the individual survival of Michael's family, a series of rescue and supply missions for medics, water, and weapons, all capped off with 4 radio missions which I assume are focused on setting up a tower or series of towers to call for help. This is just a bit shorter than 4's own DLC, with The Lost and Damned and Gay Tony having 22 and 26 missions respectively. It's worth pointing out that both Stephen Ogg and Sean Fonteno have mentioned, hinted, or outright posted images of them returning to mocap. Ned Luke, who plays Michael, however, has mentioned that he knew DLC was the plan, but has never said if he is ever actually involved. Game design isn't linear, and Norman is a much more involved rework than any other DLC that Rockstar had done before, so it's likely that art and asset work was being done extensively before any mocap would start. This is why there's extensive speculation that many of the assets in 2018's Arena War DLC were repurposed from the Zombie project, with its Mad Max-style fortified vehicles and decaying structures seen throughout. Similarly, I've personally speculated that, like the railgun, the hatchet seen in the GTA Enhanced Edition was also either a tease or a reused/unused asset. This would explain why a lot of the takedowns with it are focused on the head. It's worth noting, though, that Rockstar is a company that likes to wear its influences on its sleeve, and that it would be easy to point to even the slightest reference to a zombie apocalypse or alien invasion in the over 10 years of content that's been added to the online as reused assets, and that's not necessarily the case. Even Arena War references Mad Max Fury Road specifically, a film that came out after these projects were cancelled. But in the case of the last big DLC, it's a lot easier to see where its pieces ended up, with one Los Santos landmark serving as a constant reminder of what could have been.
So listen, I just heard a casino opened up in town. Apparently it's pretty fun. Maybe you want to check it out.
For the first 6 years of GTA 5, the casino just north of Los Santos was a bit of a mystery. Its opening soon sign seemed to taunt players, and it wouldn't be until 2019 that we'd finally get a look inside. But in that original round of online updates, players uncovered unused voice lines from Lester teasing that it was set to open its doors early. It seemed that its appearance in online was only half of the plan, with it also making an appearance as a heist in a third DLC starring Trevor. Following the trio's work with the FIB in the main game, Trevor Phillips' industry was to get a bit of government funding, with everyone's favorite psychopath finding himself working for the IAA in a DLC known simply as Agent Trevor. Agent Trevor, referred to internally as Project Clifford, was to follow the third protagonist in a James Bond-style series of missions, investigating and going undercover with Iranians, Russians, and Koreans, doing a heist in the newly opened casino, chasing down bad guys on jetpacks, and even going to space, all while working against Miles and the sinister artificial intelligence Clifford. It was at least partially intended to be a return of the IAA cast of characters from 4, who were mostly cameos in the main game, as well as the original use for characters such as Agent 14 that would show up in later online updates. At 38 missions, it's by far the longest of either the episodes from 4 or Project Norman, but some of that can be chalked up to shorter heist prep missions and it being further along in development than any of the others. Stephen Ogg, along with Senior Cinematics Director Joseph Rubino, both have spoken that production was ongoing at the same time as development for Red Dead 2, with Ogg in particular going as far to say that he had shot some stuff before the project went quiet.
And we did shoot some of that stuff with like James Bond Trevor. He's still kind of a fuck up, but he's doing his best to pretend to be like, and we shot some stuff and then it just disappeared and never did it and they never followed up on it.
Of the DLCs we've talked about, this one for me hurts the most. Not only does it feel like a good, if not a bit too fantastical continuation to the canon timeline, but putting Trevor in the IAA plays really well to the strengths of 5 in the first place. Trevor as a character started his life of crime due in part to flunking out of the Canadian Air Force training program. There's sharp contrast between his larger-than-life personality and the rigid confines of military and government work, offering plenty of opportunities for him to clash with higher-ups or go off book. It's an extension of, honestly, what I think is his strongest character moment.
Run! You're free!
But it's also just what 5 did best in general. Its big, over-the-top, almost Mission Impossible-style action movie set pieces and heists are what I think of when I look back at the main story. Crashing a biplane into the back of a C-130, interrupting an IAA interrogation, or just the entire Paletto score heist feel damn good, and more of that was likely to come with Agent Trevor, with the added benefit of gadgets like the return of jetpacks and Q-branch enhanced cars. While a lot of these DLCs revolve around where did these assets end up, Project Clifford's origins are just as interesting, with it seemingly being connected to Rockstar North's canceled project, Agent. Pieces of Agent have been in the guts of a lot of Rockstar's work under the codename Jimmy for James Bond, from hiding in level code in Los Santos to a slew of unused assets within Max Payne 3. Inside the 5 source code from 2023 were remnants of a handful of levels, including one for a space station and another for an underwater level, with the latter even having assets made. Agent Trevor features both a space station level and a reworked harpoon designed around increased underwater functionality. It's not a far stretch to speculate that some of the ideas for DLC started life in some form in Agent. This isn't far off from A, how pieces of the DLC would be repurposed for online after their cancellation, and B, how Rockstar has co-opted ideas, names, and pieces from their other franchises to incorporate into the rapidly ballooning online. Speaking of which, while the other DLC's unused assets can largely only be speculated on, Agent Trevor's pieces are a bit easier to track down. Most obviously, a version of the casino heist would be reworked in 2019 for a heist at the newly opened Diamond Casino, a remodeled version of the one seen in the main game. But judging by its working title Clifford, its close ties to the IAA, and even similar missions, the vast majority of the Agent Trevor ideas seem to have ended up in the Doomsday heist, with many of the vehicles, weapons, and even characters appearing there instead. In a lot of places as well, it sort of feels like story beats have been repeated here, which is understandable considering the project was half done. It's a little unclear if the cutscenes from either the Diamond Casino or the Doomsday heist are from those recording sessions Ogg mentioned. However, lines were uncovered from IAA agent Karen/Michelle for free roam in the world, which goes beyond her role in the Humane Labs raid, showing she was intended to accompany Trevor on at least some missions. Judging by the timeline of development and the Humane Labs raid being among the first block of heists, it's likely that voice actress Rebecca Henderson recorded them at the same time in or around 2014. While these 3 projects were the furthest along in development, A group of smaller single-player DLCs were uncovered when the GTA 5 source code leaked in 2023. While a lot less is known about them than the others, these primarily single-player add-ons paint an interesting picture of what one content roadmap could have looked like in the years following 5's release. Some, like the Assassination and Flight School DLCs, seem to be extensions of what was seen in the main game, and eventually repurposed for online, offering players more elaborate versions of Franklin's assassinations for Lester and LIA's flight training. Similarly, one simply titled Relationships seems fairly self-explanatory. 5's dating and social elements were substantially toned down from its predecessors for better or worse. It seems obvious that at least Franklin, if not Trevor as well, could benefit from some added optional dates. Though to be honest, it's hard to live down the constant calls in 4, so it was understandably scrapped. Others, however, seem to be references to previous Rockstar games. Similar to the Smuggler's Run add-on, one was also planned for Manhunt. The extent of this is unknown, and speculated in some places to have just been cosmetics. However, I will say that besides Bully 2, a Manhunt 3 seems to be the most wanted sequel from Rockstar. Another is simply labeled Liberty V, which is said to have been a full conversion of Liberty City into the world of 5. This, or Liberty City update for online, has long been rumored, hoped for, and seemingly all but confirmed when a portfolio piece from a former Rockstar artist showed a piece of a newly remastered version of Liberty City's Middle Park. However, in 2022, Kotaku alongside leakers within the community would both report that remakes of GTA 4 and Red Dead 1 were shelved not long after the disastrous release of the GTA Definitive Trilogy, and that the teams within Rockstar were instead full steam ahead on GTA 6. Whether or not the Liberty V DLC was one in-development idea for LC is unclear. Similarly, despite those rumors on the GTA forums back in 2013 being fabricated, there were some plans for a prologue DLC in North Yankton. While again it's a little unclear how much was actually here, as the main game's version of North Yankton is pretty small, in 2024 Online would get a zombie survival map in the Ludendorff Cemetery in North Yankton, ironically combining 2 of the cancelled DLC. While it's hard to say how long any of these projects were in development, by 2015 Rockstar would state that all of the GTA 5 team had been transitioned solely to online, and work on the big 3 DLCs and the other smaller ones would be shelved. It's easy to blame the DLC's cancellation on GTA Online's success. What was intended as one pillar of Rockstar's post-launch content quickly became the only pillar, with other projects being cannibalized for regular content updates. Online success feels almost like a surprise to Rockstar, and it forced them to change. Imran Sarwar would point to a problem with bandwidth. When the aforementioned trouble with online would be resolved and updates like Heists would come, it quickly became a massive, industry-changing staple that was, most importantly, making a lot of money. The episode's DLCs for 4 had underperformed, due in part, Rockstar speculated, to how long after the main game they released. While online continued to hold strong in player numbers, the risk of pulling away personnel to develop something that wasn't going to be as profitable was a hard sell. But at the same time, the company culture of Rockstar was shifting. Just under a year after the release of 5, Rockstar North president and 1/3 of the Rockstar partners, Leslie Benzies, would be forced out of the company under the guise of a new profit-sharing agreement and, quote, a well-deserved sabbatical. When he returned in 2015, he found that he'd been terminated, his support staff had been forced out, and his royalties instead divided amongst the other 2 leads, Sam and Dan Houser. Lawsuits ensued, and a large number of Rockstar's staff would follow Benzies out the door. Leslie Benzies had long been Rockstar's strongest advocate for innovative design. He developed their internal pipelines, rescued the troubled development of Red Dead Redemption, and taken charge of fixing online. The Housers, on the other hand, in 2014 or so, were instead focused on story development, and the Redemption sequel on the horizon. Some have stated that the Housers butted heads over Benzies' focus on online, but it doesn't feel like a coincidence that the single-player DLC projects went quiet at the same time as his departure. Online lives on, while Rockstar in the meantime has shifted to a once-in-a-generation approach to releases. For what it's worth, new projects from 2021 and onward, such as the Contract and the Drug Wars updates, have sort of recaptured that DLC feeling on a smaller scale, telling what feels like single-player stories in the online environment, even if the community hasn't been fully in love with them. They're not perfect, fairly short, and in the case of the Contract, locked behind the business grind online is known for, But it's interesting to see Rockstar sort of circle back around to a smaller scale version of something they would have done 10 years ago. Agent Trevor, Project Norman, and the Alien DLCs are fascinating mysteries. One that Rockstar seems to have been teasing, with mentions of Lord Zaphos, hints at jetpacks, and if one theory is to be believed, the secret message of the mural within the Chiliad tram station. But taking a look at them in hindsight shows a Rockstar that's changed, that's become risk-averse and homogenized, using the unexpected success of online to fund tentpole games. So on one hand, these massive, game-changing, once-in-a-generation titles exist because of online success. But on the other, it's easy to miss a time when the company took risks almost yearly.